Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second season of the Lauder Impact series. My name is Lucas de Carvalho, and I'm a member of the Lauder class of 2026, the Italian track. Our guest today is Matt Christensen, a proud graduate of the Lauder Spanish track in 1997. Matt is Global Head of Sustainable and Impact Investing and a Managing Director with Allianz Global Investors, which he joined in 2020. He joined Allianz from AXA Investment, where he was Global Head of Impact and Responsible Investment since 2011. Prior to this, Matt was the founding Executive Director of the think tank European Sustainable Investment Forum. He has held board positions with various impact funds, including a listed private equity fund on the London Stock Exchange, and as Vice President of one of the largest microfinance funds. Great to have you here, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Great to hear the biography and realize I'm becoming a dinosaur.
Oh, that's amazing. This is an amazing career. I'm really happy to have the chance to interview you. You started working in impact investment and sustainability before ESG was a buzzword and went on to build a remarkable career, as I just mentioned, becoming one of the world's lead investors in the area. What made you decide to pursue a career in the field?
Well, let me tell you, it was not money. At the time I did it, there was not a very clear pathway for developing a long-term career. What got me in was the feeling of what it could become more than what it was. And I'd say that, anticipating some of your questions, you still cannot just say when you look at this field, and I think that with AI, it's becoming almost challenging to say, is there any prediction of any field with how much is changing? Well, let's just say some things like, I want to join an investment bank. Might be hard to get a job, but there's a well-worn pathway about what it means to try to join an iBank and work yourself up. In sustainable investing, there's still different strands, but it's a bit easier now than it was when I got into this many years ago. But I would say that it's still an evolving and dynamic space.
Right. And staying on the topic of evolution, what would you say was one of the key turning points in your career? How did you navigate that moment, and how did your MBA and Lauder experience contribute to it?
The Lauder-Wharton combo, what it gave me was the MBA, I think of it this way, gives you a great network as well as learning tools and insurance. There's an insurance that's part of that certification you can carry with you the rest of your life. Lauder gave me the ability to understand how to think about international business, how to show up in a country, because as you rightfully said in the intro, I studied Spanish language, not French. And so I did gain tools about what's it mean to go to a country and try to think through having a business pathway or a business career. So let's say that part of the background is something that on every day I'm very grateful that I was accepted in the program and what I got from the program. And then from there, it's about taking risk. Right. So to move into this industry, I took some risk on saying I had to give up a bit of salary when I first moved into this space, but then I gained something over time because it was a growing area. And so money did happen to come in this area, although I couldn't have predicted it at the time. But I did see that it was a new space and I wanted to actually be part of that shaping of it. That was something that I was looking to do with my career.
It makes sense, taking these risks and seeing what it will take you, of course, calculated risks, right? And staying on this topic, please, Brett.
A calculated risk, and everybody has to, and as I see Wharton and Lauder MBAs all the time, we talk a lot about risk thresholds. And everyone has to individually decide where are they on that spectrum. But one thing I always encourage every person I meet is to say, don't forget that what you already have is a pretty good background that many people do not. So taking a bit more risk than you might be comfortable doing, I've seen that more often pays dividends, even if it's not right away.
You mentioned that when you started the field, it was something still developing and it evolved a lot throughout the years. And when you joined, people didn't know what it meant. And I think still many people don't actually know what sustainable and impact investing actually means. So in your view, what's the goal of sustainable and impact investing, and how do you manage the need to generate financial gains while generating a broader impact?
Standard definition is that it's fiduciary duty-led investing. And the question is, well, what's fiduciary duty leadership mean, or fiduciary duty as a concept? And the way I explain that is you are trying to think through how to incorporate various risks and opportunities that might not always be purely financial. They might touch finance, they might touch directors and board governance, but you cannot always perfectly monetize it in an algorithm. You can find proxies to get to a view, and with that information, you can then make decisions. That's where sustainability comes in, or impact investing. It's about how do we take areas that are not as well taught or as well monetized in terms of regulation or in terms of unagreed criteria. Let's use a classic one. We talk about climate change and carbon, and people often say measuring your carbon footprint. That might be the most mature key performance indicator at the moment in this area of sustainability, but it's still relatively new. And it's still about, well, what's it mean if you measure your carbon footprint as a company, and it's a heavy one? The question as an investor for us is, well, are you trying to find a lower carbon footprint? Are you innovating? Are you thinking about your operations? Because a long-term perspective on sustainable investing would be that probably carbon pricing over time is going to get more expensive. Even if we have political winds going up and down, the idea of what we see happening in more of a say 5, 10, 15, or even intergenerational viewpoint, the evidence is that it's not going to get much easier on these environmental and social factors that we see around us. And that's about what's the best way to think about that in the timescales we need to do to make money.
This view in investing, it now faces some changes as a few regions of the world kind of turn their backs on it, while others still praise the idea. What are the major challenges and opportunities you see in the field currently, and what are your expectations for the future?
Well, let's take the US because that's where it's most challenged politically. What I would see is that the challenge is about how to get it out of the political ideological battles. And it's a very convenient one to choose for fighting, which is why I don't think it'll go away tomorrow. But let's just say how to get it out of political ideology and keep it as an investment discussion. And so in the US, you have to think about the semantics of language. And the classic one is you in some certain states, let's say, would have to think not about, let's talk about climate risk, but we would have to talk about our energy security challenges. So that is a way to, and that's just a small example of how do you become more impervious of political winds and battles and keep it to what is the challenge we are talking about to think through an opportunity to make money or better control our risks. And my expectation is that and I'll say in the US, that we're going to see political cycles that go up and down on this topic. And so right now I would think of it as sort of a bear market under the Trump regime. It was a bull market with Biden, and it'll probably be somewhere in between with the next presidential cycle.
Makes sense. I think you can never escape the bears and the bulls, right? And for MBA students or recent grads interested in following your steps, your footsteps, what advice would you give them?
Try to figure out, if you're interested in sustainability, try to figure out what angle. So the ways I would be putting questions to myself would be, am I more a public market oriented person or a private market person? Public markets being more around stocks, fixed income, green bonds. Private market being more around private equity, venture capital, private credit, infrastructure. That is a good way to start thinking through in terms of just the financial side. Where do you feel your skills can be best put to use? And then where are the opportunities that follow? And so you could then tackle it in various ways. You could go straight into an impact investment institution. You could go into the World Bank and touch this topic through emerging markets. You could go do this in a mainstream, let's say, consultancy and get some projects that touch the topic. So there's various angles for you to navigate. How's the best way to start testing your fortitude, your skills, and your interest in this area? I think if you're going to be interested in sustainability, now's probably the best time in a way that if you have the interest now, when it's not as easy to deal with it, that probably means you have a strong interest. Why do I say that? I saw a lot of MBAs asking me about this topic when everybody wanted to do it. And so it became almost like consulting on campus. Everybody wanted to be a consultant. I'm sure that's still the case in many ways. And everybody wanted to be in sustainability. When it's a bear market, that's a better test. How much do you still want to be in this area? When it's a bull market, it's easy. And so you start to see who really has the very authentic interest, as opposed to it's a cool thing to brag about when it's popular.
And finally, before we move to our quick fire insights, I'd like to ask you about success. You are now a managing director and global head at one of the world's largest asset managers. How has your definition of success evolved throughout your career?
I would say that the evolution that goes with aging, in my case, is there a way for me in this topic to consider how can I have the best way to link to a systemic impact? A lot of people in sustainability, that's a lot of what drives them. I'm one of those people. So it's a job with a nice title in a big asset manager, as you rightfully say. But part of what my definition of success is about how can I think of areas of work that we do that can be imitated by others, or that can create more comfort for institutional investors to put money to work. That's more of a systemic mindset. And I try to always balance what I have to do to be successful in more short-term timescales, running a business unit, having investment products that actually make money and not just have good impact stories, but equally how to be involved at the table of longer-term issues. I will give one yesterday. This is a not to brag, but since you asked the question, I was with President Macron yesterday here in France with a group of other investors because he has an initiative called the One Planet Finance Initiative to attract capital from sovereign wealth funds from around the world and put that capital across asset classes towards solving climate issues and making money. And so there's a group of sovereign wealth investors here for 2 days and a group of asset managers. And we were in a room for 2 days, of which President Macron came for part of that, not the whole thing, to think about how do we use the convening power of a president of a country to push more investing from a huge group of sovereign wealth investors that can make an impact to actually enlarge the system of investing in this field. That's part of what motivates me.
Amazing. I think creating this legacy for future generations, right? And growing the area. Are you now ready for our quick fire insights?
Sure.
Fantastic. So just to conclude our interview, what's one thing you tell your younger self?
Take more risk. I think that as MBAs, we are naturally, even if we think that we want to take on risk, there's a risk aversion that lies within many MBAs. That's why a lot of entrepreneurs don't have MBAs. Some of them do. But I would say continue to think about taking a bit more risk than you naturally would.
If you could master one new skill instantly, what would it be?
Probably two. The first one, how to think about leveraging all the AI tools of the future to not need to take some of the classes I took at Wharton on the more numerical side. I'd like to think that AI will do some of what we had to do as students, and hopefully you will not have to do. That'll be one. So curation of AI towards just numeracy and the kind of base bedrock of evidence that you need for a meeting. And then the other one is always thinking through how can you read the room as fast as possible to then focus on your audience with the right message. Messages change depending on the room.
What's a book you've read recently that you would recommend?
Die with Zero. It's an interesting one. And so the idea of making sure that what you're doing here, as much as you think about how do I take care of my family, or how do I think about saving money and watching, your investments go up over time, how do you also think through that ending my life with a lot on the table? Is that really the end all be all as opposed to experiencing the giving while you're living?
That's an amazing book. I've just read it and I agree with you. How would you describe Lauder Alumni in one word?
One word. Lateral thinkers. That's two.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was the Lauder Impact series, and stay tuned for the next episode.